Well, good morning. As Kevin had mentioned, my name is Pastor Sam. I'm really glad to be here again. I was going to share a few things, and we're going to give today's message. But before I begin, I just wanted to say that I'm just so privileged to be here with you guys. I think if you've been here a while, you've seen my face a few times through Pastor Nick. And I just want to say that I've been so blessed hearing from Pastor Nick about you guys and this church. And I know you guys have, especially if you've been here a while, you've kind of gone through your ups and downs getting to this place. But I've just been really inspired by your faithfulness and just your dedication to each other and to the Lord. And even though I probably know you guys more than you know me, because I've been hearing from Pastor Nick about just the congregation, I just want to say, just kind of vicariously through Nick, I've just been really blessed by this group, and that you guys are a special group. And I hope that I know that you know that, but I just wanted to, from a third person kind of coming here and just really wanting to affirm you and wanting to see that what you have been a part of and what you're doing now, that it's really a special thing. And I just really wanted to encourage you to keep that. I know there's things changing, and I just heard that new board members kind of came on, and I just really feel the Lord kind of breathing and moving and taking you guys in a direction. And that's still yet to see what that's going to be, but I'm really excited to see and be a part of that indirectly. So I just wanted to share that encouragement. I don't know if you knew, but the church actually supports me in the ministry that I do, and that's how I got connected with Pastor Nick. It's through my Standing Stone ministry. So Standing Stone ministry is where we shepherd the shepherds. So we minister to those that are ministering to everyone else. So we walk alongside pastors and missionaries and ministry leaders. We come alongside them. And so I wanted to give you just kind of like a brief update, a little picture of what God had been doing this past year in 2024. 2024, I met with and ministered to 46 different pastors and ministry leaders throughout the year that represented 35 different churches. And as a result, impacted thousands of church members. And it's interesting because that second line is actually what the Lord initially spoke to me about going into this ministry. He's saying, I want you to multiply your impact upon the church. That I love the local church and I love where I was, and I never thought of leaving. But he really said, I want you to minister to the pastors who are ministering to those that are underneath them. And so just a way of really impacting a greater people. Another thing that happened in 2024 was God connected me a lot with college students, which I had actually no experience in. I was a little bit worried when the Lord was leading me in that direction. But I had an opportunity to connect with over 250 different college students. Really, the Lord saying, I want you to come alongside the next generation. And Standing Stone as a ministry, we really want to be more preventative than crisis care. Unfortunately, it's a lot of crisis care because I always say, what do you think it takes for a pastor to reach out for help? And that's what we're getting, right? So we're getting a lot of people that are not in the best place, but at our heart, we want to be more preventative. And so meeting with these younger ministry leaders is really a key part of that we're able to do that. So how do we do that? For me, it took place in the form of one-on-one mentoring and coaching, like I did with Pastor Nick. I've been doing actually a lot of marriage counseling and working with pastors in their marriages and their families. Two things that we added last year were 2 different cohorts specifically for pastors to grow together and connect together and to be restored together. So one was called the Journey of Wholeness, leading for those that are burnt out. And a Be Free cohort with pastors and ministry leaders, and Be Free retreats with college students. So I have a few pictures here of those. The first one here is the Be Free cohort for pastors. Actually, 2 of the pastors here were actually had left the ministry and were in transition. And after the cohort, 1 year later, both of them have returned back to ministry. And so it's kind of a great testimony of the power of the cohort together. The next one here, this is the cohort for pastors and ministry leaders, Journey of Wholeness. And this was really addressing those that are really feeling like they're in the valley, and to really come alongside those that are in a difficult place, in a difficult spot, and to come support them, to care for them, and to love them, and to encourage them. So that was this group. The last one is one of the college groups that I got to be a part of. We did a Be Free conference for these college students. And like I said, these are the next generation of those that are going to lead the church. And so I got an opportunity to be able to minister to them. And so I wanted to just give you just a brief snapshot of the things that the Lord is doing through Standing Stone Ministry. And I just want to tell you that the need is just so great. And when the Lord first called me into this, it was in 2020. It was right at the beginning of the pandemic. And no one knew what the pandemic was going to be all about. But at the time, the Lord said, I want you to leave your church that you love, and I want you to do it full time, because the need is great. And I had no idea. Nobody had any idea that what was going to happen over the next several years with the pandemic. But even though in our minds it's like in the rearview mirror, and we want it to be in the rearview mirror, we don't want to think about that time anymore. We don't want to wear a mask anymore. We don't want to be a part of that season anymore. I think the church and all these pastors had really experienced and are still experiencing the repercussions of that time. And so this is a really crucial time for this kind of ministry to come alongside pastors and churches. So I wanted to encourage you, if you wanted to support me, I'd love for you to be able to at least pray for me. So you might have gotten a card as you came in, and there's a place if you wanted to just commit to praying for me. I give regular updates. So if you sign up and put down your email, I can give you an update just to give you a reminder to pray and then to see what the Lord is doing throughout his church. If you wanted to consider maybe even supporting me financially, there's a place to mark for that as well. And if you wanted to find out more information about Standing Stone, I know this is a very brief update, but I have information in the back. You can have a flyer on the way out to give you more information about that. But I wanted to thank you guys for supporting me and being a part of, what I do. And I know that you guys are direct beneficiaries of that with Pastor Nick, but I wanted to just share with you and to thank you for that. Okay, well, let's kind of shift gears. Today's message, we're going to be looking at, the title is Storm Watchers. Okay, Storm Watchers. And the main passage we're going to look at to start off is Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 to 27. Okay, let's take a look at that. Matthew chapter 7, verse 24, it says, "Everyone then who hears these words of mine," this is Jesus speaking, "and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on a rock. And then the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall, because it had been founded on the rock." Now verse 26, "And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like the foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rains fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house. And it fell, and great was the fall of it." Okay, so we look at this story that Jesus tells, and it's part of the Sermon on the Mount where he gives instructions about how we're supposed to live. And he describes two different scenarios where we have two different people. We have two different builders who are building two houses, and they're building them on different foundations. And Jesus is trying to compare and contrast these two situations with these two builders. So let's kind of do the same thing. Let's look at what's the same between these things and what's different. Okay, what's the same? Both of them are builders. Both of them want to build a house. Both of them have the intention that they want this house to last. No one's going to want to build a house only to have it be destroyed and to fall down. Their intent is they want the house to last. Okay, so both of the builders have the same intention. They're both wanting their house to survive. but both of them are building on a different foundation. Okay, so the first one, back in verse 24, we see that they're built upon the rock. Okay, and if we look at what Jesus is referring to, he's referring to himself. Later, he's going to call himself the chief cornerstone, referring himself as the rock that the church is going to be built upon. It's talking about him being the foundation. Okay, so this is an early reference to that being Jesus, that Jesus is the foundation that the house is supposed to be built upon the rock. The other person in verse 26 is the one that built it on the sand. Okay? And when you look at the two situations, that's the main difference. The main difference is that one built it on the rock upon Jesus, and the other one is on the sand. Okay, that's what the difference is, but I want to point out something that is the same. Okay, what is the same between these two situations? The same is both houses get the storm. Both houses get the storm. And I don't want you to miss the significance of this similarity between the two situations. It's the house that's built on the rock, the firm foundation, the one that's centered on Jesus, founded on Jesus, also gets the storm. It's not just the house that's built on the sand, that's built on the shaky foundation, that's not built on Jesus, that's not built on the rock, that doesn't have the secure foundation. It's not just that house that gets the storm. It's also the house that's built on the foundation that's firm, that's built on God, that's built on Christ, that's built on this foundation, also gets the storm, where the wind blows and the winds come. This is important to recognize, because if we're just looking at the storm, you can't tell the difference on the two houses, because both of them get the storm. If you're only looking at the storm, if you're only looking at the things that are coming, beating against the house, all the things that you're facing in the life, all the storms that we're facing in our life, if you're just looking at all the difficulties and all the problems, you cannot tell the difference between the two houses, because both houses get the storm. When we look at this is very telling. Because if we become storm watchers and keep our focus on what's going wrong, what are the things that we're facing and the storms that we're facing, we're not actually going to be able to tell the difference between our two situations about where our foundation is. I remember when my wife and I first got married, and this year we're going to be celebrating our 28th anniversary. I can't believe it's going to be 28 years. But I remember when we first got married, I actually felt really bad, and I still feel bad when I think about it, because when I first met my wife, she was a junior high teacher, and I was starting to teach at community college. Okay, so I taught economics in community college, and so that's where we were when we got married. She was a teacher, I was a teacher. We were going to have our summers off together and travel together. But right after we got married, literally 2 months after we got married, the Lord called me into ministry. And I felt like this is the ultimate bait and switch that I had with my wife. She thought she was marrying a teacher. Then 2 months later, surprise, God's calling me into ministry. So we entered into that time where my wife is just starting out as a junior high teacher. I'm going to seminary. Okay, I'm going to seminary, and I was at Talbot. And it's private school. It's very expensive. Okay, so we're on a school teacher's salary, okay, which is not making a lot of money. I'm going to this private school. It's very expensive. And so all that to say, it was a very stressful financial situation. Okay, and just to give you some background, I want to kind of talk about my own kind of money personality, and I wanted to ask maybe about yours. Okay, so what I talk about money personality, I'm talking about the basic, there's a lot of different versions of this, but the most simplistic is two categories. There's spenders and there's savers. Okay, there's spenders and then there's savers. Okay, so let me just give you a quick kind of litmus test. Okay, so let's say right now, okay, I have in my pocket, I have cards I'm going to pass out to everyone, and loaded on that card, $10,000. Okay, I'm going to pass it out right now. I'm going to give you $10,000. What's the first thought that comes into your mind? What's the first thought that comes into your mind? Is it what you're going to buy? Or is it how are you going to save? Okay, turn to your neighbor. What's the first thing that pops in your mind? I'm going to give you $10,000 right now. Okay, what is the immediate thought that's coming in your mind? Turn to your neighbor, tell you, is it what are you going to buy? Or how are you going to save? Okay, let's see. How many, the first thought that comes in your mind if I give you $10,000 right now is, how am I going to save this? Oh, this is kind of actually the most I've ever seen when I'm giving this message. And then how many are, the first reaction is, what am I going to buy? Oh, I got some honest people. That's really good. Okay, my money personality is saver. Okay, no one taught me this. In fact, growing up, we never talked about money. That was like taboo. No one taught me this. I was just naturally a saver. Okay, my dad was like that. I was like that. So I was like, I wouldn't say extreme saver, although my wife would say that. You know, I would say thrifty. She says I'm cheap. Like, I don't know, but I'm just a good steward of God's money, his resources. Just to give you an example, I don't know if you guys remember this, maybe some of you guys older. Like in the Sunday paper, I don't know if they have this anymore, they had these coupon booklets you'd get in the Sunday paper. Okay, and there's like these 2 or 3 different booklets that's full of different coupons, right? Can I tell you that was one of my favorite activities, was getting the Sunday paper, cutting out all the different coupons, and then I had a coupon organizer with envelope that goes in there. I go to the same store that had these double coupon days, and I'd go there so often that I memorized every aisle. So I know what goes on every aisle, and I would organize my coupons by the aisle. So I would go down, and each coupon would pop up, so I wouldn't miss anything, okay? And I would save as much as possible. Okay, I remember one day that there was this super Kmart. You guys remember Kmart? You know, there was this super Kmart that opened up by my house. And the super Kmart had groceries, okay? They were kind of before their time, before Walmart did this. They had groceries there, and to advertise, they had triple coupon day. I was so excited. I can't tell you how excited I was to go to this triple coupon day. So I took my coupons, from the Sunday paper. I had my envelope, and then I go into Super Kmart, and then I go and shop. Okay, and I was putting all the stuff in my car, and I go to check out, and I have like $100 worth of items in my car. How much did I end up paying? Zero. Right? I don't know. I don't think they have their system worked out, because like some of the triple coupons was more than the price of the item. So it covered all the rest. I paid zero. I was like so proud. I took that receipt. I put it on the refrigerator. I was just showing my wife about it. I just wanted to give you a little background going into just telling the story that this was my money personality. Okay, so you can see as we're entering into marriage, and then we're going throughout this time, and I have my lovely wife, and I thought, who did I marry? I married such a spender. Okay, and to be honest, I look at her now and I think, she's not really a spender, okay? I've seen some spenders. Maybe some of you are those people. But I've seen some spenders that she's not actually like that. But compared to me, I thought she was like the most liberal spender that there possibly was, right? And so I remember her like bringing bags home, and I was like, what's in the bag? And then after a while, she wouldn't tell me. She'd say, stuff. She's not going to tell me what's inside, right? And so I'm like, come on, it's okay. You just tell me, And so she'd tell me, oh, I got some shoes. I'm like, another pair of shoes? how many shoes does a woman need? Like, we only got 2 feet. How many shoes do you have? And she's trying to explain to me, it's like work shoes and this shoes and, this height and this height, this color. I'm like, no, you don't need this many shoes. You need 3 shoes, right? And so we had this big arguments that we would have, and this would go on for years. This would go on for years. And it got to the point where we would get in a lot of arguments about it. And so we would argue about it. And like I said, we were not in the best financial situation. And so we would end up arguing about money a lot. Okay. And money comes up very often, in terms of like your daily living. And so I remember this one day, we're saying like, okay, we're gonna kind of put a squash on spending. And so I remember this one day, she brought this bag home. Like, she was at the mall, she brought this bag home. And then I asked her, what's in there? And she didn't want to say. Okay. So I just went in there, and then I pulled it out, and it was this dress. Okay. And so I said, I thought we agreed not to buy anything. She said, I wasn't going to buy anything. That wasn't my plan. So I was just going to go, and I was going to window shop. So I said, I was walking by the store, and it caught my eye, this dress. And I'm like, I should just go in there and try it, right? I'm just going to try it. I'm not going to buy, right? I'm just going to see if you have my size. And then she goes in there, and she says, I think God was with me because they had my size. So they had the size of my dress. Then she goes in and she tries on the dress, and she says, literally, she felt like Satan was like speaking to her, saying like, oh, this dress looks so good on you. You look so amazing in this dress. And I was saying, so what did you do? What did you do? I said, you should have rebuked Satan and said, get behind me, Satan. And she said, I did do that. I told him, get behind me, Satan. And then Satan said, you look really good from back here too. That last part didn't happen, but that did happen. That story did happen. And we got in this huge fight. And I remember after that fight, how my wife, she was just crying, and I was really sitting with the Lord and saying, why is this all happening? Why do we go through the same thing over and over again? And it got to the point where one day I was in our closet, and there was this pile of stuff in our closet, and I was kind of like cleaning things out. And underneath all that stuff, like, I saw some clothes with tags on it. And I realized that she was hiding stuff from me. And I thought, wow, it's gotten to that point where she has to hide. That she can't trust me anymore. And it's not just about money, but it was about trust. Like, the trust was broken, and I feel like she couldn't feel safe to share things with me. She couldn't feel safe to share what's on her heart with me. And so I remember I was talking with the Lord about that, and the whole time I was thinking what the problem was. And I said, the problem is we don't have enough money. The problem is we keep arguing. The problem is all of these things that keep happening over and over again, all these arguments we're getting in. The problem is all of these things. And the Lord was saying, that's not the problem. These things are not the problem. These things are the storm. These are the storms that you're facing. But that's not the problem. He said the problem is your foundation. He said the problem is because you use money as your security. Because this is what makes you feel secure and safe. And when she spends money, it's messing with your foundation. It's messing with your sense of security. Because you're trusting money instead of trusting me. And I know that was the case because once I graduated and started working and becoming a pastor, and I know the church doesn't pay a lot, but instead of like spending a lot of money, I was actually making money, and we're in a much better financial situation, but it's still happening. It's not about the storm. It's about the foundation. And this is what Jesus is trying to share in this parable with these two houses and these two builders. If you're just looking at the storm, you're not going to see what the real issue is. If you're just looking at the external things that are happening in your life and the problems that we're facing, we're not going to see where the real problem is, where the real solution is. If you don't know what the problem is, then you can't bring a solution. If you're going to keep focusing on the storm and being a storm watcher and being constantly focused on it, and I want to tell you, it's so easy to do that. It's normal to do that. It's normal to have all your focus be on the storm, because just like a big thunderstorm that's happening outside, it really catches your attention. It's so loud. It's so big. It's so hurtful. It's so trying. It's easy to focus all of your attention on the storm, to be a storm watcher. I want to say it's very easy to do that. It's normal to do that. But when we do that, we're missing something. We're missing what the Lord wants to show us. Because it's not about the storm. It's about the foundation. You know, when we look at an example in Jesus' life, I think that we can kind of see when we focus so much on the storm that sometimes we misinterpret what God is trying to do in our life. Let's look at this example in Jesus' life, Matthew 3:17. Okay, Matthew 3:17 is a picture of Jesus' baptism. Okay, it's a very significant, monumental event in Jesus' life. And let's look at the very end of that in Matthew 3:17. And it says, "Behold, a voice from heaven said, 'This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased.'" This is my beloved Son, with whom I'm well pleased. Okay, this is Jesus like getting baptized, coming out of the water. The heavens are opening up, and the voice of God the Father audibly is coming down so they can hear and actually record these words, and says, the Father is saying and looking at the Son and saying, "This is my beloved Son. I love him. I am well pleased with him." Now, it's important to note that this is happening before he starts his ministry. He has not started his public ministry. That's going to come right after this time. He hasn't even started his public ministry yet. Yet this is the Father's assessment of Jesus. "This is my beloved Son, whom I'm well pleased." Before he's started serving, before he's done anything, before he's launched his public ministry and fulfilled his purpose, God is already pleased with him because he's his Son. This is God's affirmation of Jesus. This is his crowning affirmation of who Jesus is as his beloved Son. That's at the very end of Matthew chapter 3, is this. What's the very next verse that we see? Matthew 4:1. "Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil." Okay, he's going to go into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil for 40 days and for 40 nights. And I want to say, he's being led into this wilderness to be tempted by the devil. Who is leading Jesus into this storm? It's the Spirit. The Spirit is the one leading him into the storm. Now, this can be kind of confusing to us because we have a particular mindset about what the storm means for us and what is going to happen in our life. But when we look at the life of Jesus, this is very telling for us. When we look at what happens to him as he entered his storm, I can't imagine what kind of storm he's entering in. For 40 days and 40 nights, he's doing a complete fast, no food or no water. So he's so physically weak during this time where he's constantly be berated by the enemy, being tempted by the devil day and night for 40 days and 40 nights. I can't imagine the mental and emotional turmoil that Jesus is experiencing during these 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness. He's going through a storm. He's going through a storm. But the Spirit is the one directing him to the storm. Why? The question is why? Why would the Spirit lead Jesus into this storm? Well, I think this is one of the key things that we can kind of understand, because oftentimes we think a storm is coming because there's something wrong. But maybe the storm is coming because there's something right. Maybe sometimes the storms are for promotion and not for correction. So oftentimes we think that a storm is coming because a correction needs to take place. And certainly there are times when that happens. But sometimes we think that it's only for correction, but sometimes it's actually when God wants to give us a promotion for us to step into something. When we look at Jesus being led into the wilderness, do you think that he's going into the wilderness because there's something wrong with Jesus that needs correction? Let me ask it again. Do you think Jesus is going into the storm, into the wilderness, because there's something wrong with him that needs correcting? Or is it because that the Father sees that there's something right in him that he wants him to step into? Sometimes the storms are not for correction. It's for promotion. He wants us to step into something. Then what is the purpose of the storm if it's not for correction? It's for a deepening of our foundation. It's not that our foundation is wrong, that he wants to grow deeper. I mean, I'm not an architect, okay, but from what I understand, the deeper the foundation, the higher you can build. Is that right? The deeper the foundation, the higher you can build. So if God wants to lead you and to bring you into a new place, to something that he wants to lead you and lead your family into, something that's greater than what you're currently experiencing, higher than you're currently experiencing, more abundant than you're currently experiencing, what does it require? It requires a deeper foundation. And it's not because something is not right, it's because something is right and that he wants to build on it. When we look at a storm and we're so focused in on the storm, it becomes storm watchers, we can get confused. We can get confused to say, this is all wrong. This is all bad. Everything's falling apart. It's easy to get that kind of message. But we have to see, this is not actually always true. This might not be true in your situation. Maybe you're going through a storm. Maybe you're going through some difficulties, and it's easy to be a storm watcher and to let those things consume you. But I want to say, sometimes the storm is not for correction, but it's for a deepening of your foundation so you can go higher. Let's look at one more. Is it okay? Can we look at one more storm story? Is that okay? One more storm story. Okay, one more storm story. We're going to look at in Mark. I don't have it here. I'm sorry. I think it's Mark 4. I could be wrong. But in this particular chapter in Mark, we're going to look at it here. Jesus and his disciples are going on one side of the lake, and they're going to be traveling on the other side of the lake. And it says, on that day when evening had come, Jesus said to them, let's go across to the other side. And leaving the crowd, they took him, and they went in the boat, just as he was, and the other boats were with him. And a great windstorm came, and the waves were breaking into the boat so that the boat was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? And he awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said to them, Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith? Okay, this is a passage actually God takes me to very frequently, and maybe because I'm a storm watcher, okay? Maybe because I'm always focused on the negative and it always grabs my attention, but he always brings me back to this passage. And so he was speaking to me about this passage and saying, look at this storm that they're facing. They're facing a literal storm. And they're facing this storm, and the disciples are panicked, and they feel like they're going to die. Okay, have you ever felt that? I know I felt that too, like going through the storm. And they're so disturbed and they feel like they're going to die. And so they're going to look for Jesus. And Jesus is asleep. And I still don't know how Jesus is asleep in this storm that's big enough that has professional fishermen afraid for their life. I mean, this is not like a little storm, like for me that I'm not on the ocean. Like if there's like a little bit of a wave, whoa, it's not like that. These are professional fish. They're not going to be freaked out by that. This is a big enough storm where they're afraid for their life. And Jesus is asleep. And they go to Jesus, and Jesus says to them, "Why are you so afraid?" And I'm thinking, why is he asking that question? Isn't it obvious why they're afraid? Because of this big giant storm that's happening. Like, that's all raging. Why is he asking, why are you afraid? And then he says, "Why do you have so little faith?" Now, this is very confusing to me. Because think about the situation. They're facing a storm. They're really panicked. They're so afraid for their life. What should you do in that situation? You should go to Jesus. Isn't that what they do? That's exactly what they do. They go to Jesus when they're facing the storm, when they're facing the problem, they go to Jesus. Isn't that what they're supposed to be doing? There's some of us that face storms, we don't go to Jesus. We try to handle it on our own. That's not what they're doing. They're going to Jesus when they're facing the storm. Why does he say they're having so little faith? Excuse me. And I want to say that this was confusing to me. And so I was kind of meditating on it. And then the Lord spoke to me saying, the reason you don't understand what Jesus is saying here is because you're a storm watcher. You think it's about the storm. He's not talking about the storm. If he was talking about the storm, then all the things you'd be saying were true. Like, it's obvious why they're afraid. They are having faith. It's not about the storm. And he said, go back to the beginning. Go back to verse 35. It says, on that day when evening had come, Jesus said to them, let's go to the other side. Now, in order to understand this, you have to understand the context of how Jesus operates. If you look at John 5:19, Jesus tells his mode of operation. He says, the Son does nothing of his own initiative. He only does what he sees the Father doing. Okay, so if you understand that and you look at verse 35, when he says, let's go to the other side, why is he saying, let's go to the other side? Because he sees the Father is doing something. The Father's doing something on the other side, so we need to go and do what the Father is doing. So when he's saying that, he's telling the disciples, we're going to go to the other side. We're going to go to the other side. So when he confronts the disciples and say, why are you so afraid? He's saying, why are you letting the storm speak louder than me? I said we're going to go to the other side. I told you we're going to be okay. This is what the Father is doing. Why are you letting the storm speak louder than me? Verse 35 says, we're going to go across to the other side. He said, this is why he's asking the question, why are you so afraid? Why is your faith so little? Why are you letting the storm be bigger than me? I remember I was going to a friend's house, and he had this plaque on the wall, and he said, you either have big problems and a small God, or a big God and small problems. And I said, that's so true. When we're a storm watcher, we have big problems and a small God. And I think if you take anything away from today is we need to flip the script on that. We need to have a big God and small problems. If you're here today and you're going through a storm, that's my encouragement to you, is to be able to receive and to take our sights away from the storm, the things that are going wrong. because it's so easy to focus in on the negative things, what's not right, what's not happening, what we're lacking, what's wrong with our kids, what's wrong with our situation, what's wrong with our job, what's wrong with our finances, what's wrong with our church, what's wrong with our ministry, what's wrong with our health, what's wrong. It's so easy to focus in on the storm and what's not happening, what's not right. But Jesus' message is clear today. It's not about the storm. It's about the foundation. It's about Jesus. It's about the rock. It's becoming intimately connected with him. That's the solution. And that's the direction he wants us to go. Let's pray. So, Father, I want to just come alongside my fellow brothers and sisters and say, we need your grace to take our eyes off the storm. It's so easy for us to be transfixed on that and to be problem solvers and focus all our attention on what we need to do to take care of the things that need to get done and are not right. But I think your admonition for us this morning is we want to come in to be engaged with you again. We want to let you be our secure foundation, that when the winds come and the waves come, that our house is secure and it doesn't fall. So I pray that you'd give us that grace to stand upon you as our rock and as our foundation, that we'd feel that security that comes from an intimacy, being intimately connected with Jesus. So I pray that you restore that in our hearts and lift our eyes up above the storm to you, Lord Jesus. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. Amen.